How do you write an intro so good that your audience sticks around for more than 3 seconds? So we all know just how distracted people are these days. Our smartphones alone have us scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, X, and as creators, getting people to click on your content can feel like a huge mountain to climb. But don't worry though, because if you're looking to figure out how to write an introduction that gets your audience to stay, I've got some of my best tips as a copywriter. My first tip is to understand your audience. I know. This is what everybody says, but the first thing you have to understand is that a great hook isn't really a clever line. So it's not about wordplay, it's about impact. Some classic marketers will stress the need for creativity and cleverness because back then it was all about the art, and that worked in the past to a certain extent. However, before the internet, you couldn't really track sales and audience impact the way that you can now with digital marketing. You simply write an ad on TV or on the radio and then hope that people would remember it. These days though, writing a good hook in terms of marketing is like holding up a mirror to your audience. You want them to see themselves in your words or reflected in your words, and you want them to think, oh, that's me. You described my problem or my situation perfectly. Because if you don't know your ideal customer is, or who your ideal customer is, both inside and out, you won't really be able to persuade them to listen, to pay attention, or especially to take action. So now the question is, how do you write a hook or intro that resonates? Well, the first step to understanding your audience requires answering these questions for yourself. So first is, who is this for? Next is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What everyday frustrations, pains, or doubts are they dealing with? What are they tired of putting up with? For example, are they tired of watching another whole year slip by without being able to chase their dream? How do they want to feel instead? What does it look like if what does their life look like when they finally are able to solve their problem? So what does this look like once you've answered all these questions? Let's assume that our customer is someone who wants to serve healthy meals for their family, but doesn't have the time or energy to cook. So the first question is, who is this for? The answer would be something like busy parents who are maybe 30 years old or above who want to serve their family healthy meals. And what is the problem that you're trying to solve? So what are their everyday frustrations, pains, or doubts that they deal with? One is they want to save time and energy by preparing and cooking healthy and nutritious meals for a family. So maybe one of their problems includes that these parents come home from work every day, tired and stressed out, and they just want to relax, de-stress. But they can't yet because, they still have to prepare dinner for the family. And maybe because of that, they're frustrated because even if they wanted to, they can't cook and provide a healthy meal. So most of the time, they resort to quick, instant meals that just fill the belly but have no nutritional value at all. So the next question, let's try to go through it. How do you want them to feel instead? What does their life look like when they finally solve their problem? So, maybe finally they have time for themselves after work, time to rest and recuperate, time to heal and take off the stress they've been carrying throughout the day. Maybe their family's eating healthy now, and as a result, they all feel better. They have more energy. There are less trips to the doctor, and the kids are growing up well. Sun Tzu once said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. This is why knowing your audience is the first step to creating any piece of content, whether it's for marketing purposes or simply for entertainment or informational. It's the bridge that connects you and your audience. And if you don't know what your audience wants or needs, then you won't be able to offer them a solution that solves their problem the way that they want it solved. Now, moving on to my second tip for writing good intros is to get straight to the point. So in storytelling, there's this technique called in medias res, which is Latin for in the middle of things. So basically all it means is that instead of starting with a slow, laborious setup, you drop the audience right into the action. So many stories like especially in the action and the thriller genre have used this technique time and again. They drop you right in the middle of a struggle, right in the middle of a battle, right in the middle of a war. And when it comes to marketing and copywriting, this can also be very effective, especially when you consider the many other things that are fighting for people's attention. Does this mean that slow intros don't work? Like if you don't get straight to the point, does it mean you lose your audience instantly? Well, yes and no. It can. But it depends on what type of audience you're trying to build. So if you prefer somebody who's not in a rush, then slow intros are just fine. But more often than not, you want to at least let your audience know what to expect from your content. So putting this into practice can be something as simple as, today I'm going to give you 3 big tips on how meal prepping can save you hours worth of time and energy, especially if you want to feed your family a healthy, nutritious meal every single day. So getting straight to the point works really well, especially if you don't have a warm audience. If you're fairly new and nobody knows or recognizes you, this is where it's important. Because when you're conscious and respectful of people's time, and in return you give them tremendous value for their attention, your audience will respond in kind. Now, moving on to the third tip that I want to give out is to address the problem or pain point that you're trying to solve. So, this is somewhat connected to getting straight to the point, where you need to clarify to your audience why they clicked on your piece on the first place. So, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and how does it relate to them? So, sometimes it helps to repeat this at the beginning of your article or your video because it gives your audience an idea of what to expect. I don't know if you're old enough to remember those old infomercials that you usually find on TV, but think about how they started off their spiels. It's not very different actually from how ads today often start. Often even with the same wording and phrasing. Something like, "Are you tired of spending hundreds of dollars on gym memberships, programs, and trainers? Maybe you're tired of having to wake up early morning to go to a gym packed with sweaty bodies. Well, what if you could accomplish your workouts in the comfort of your own home for half the price?" Now, I know it sounds incredibly cliched and cheesy, but trust me, it works. And that's why you'll always find these no matter what era. And the thing is, you can always write it in such a way that it doesn't sound too on-the-nose salesy. In fact, some of the best introductions often start with a story. For example, "I used to be 300 pounds overweight and I tried everything to lose it. Gym memberships, trainers, dieting, all of it. When I first heard about the Fat Buster 2000, I thought, these guys are surely pulling my leg. There's no way this actually works. So imagine how surprised I was that after just 3 months, I'd lost about 100 pounds. See, when you study it closely, it's the same exact tactic, but it's a different approach. So talk about your audience's problems and talk about how you can help solve it. Now, the fourth tip that I want to give out is to talk about your audience's dreams, their wants, and their needs. Content doesn't always have to be problem focused. It doesn't have to be negative all the time. And you don't always have to talk about the doom and gloom of people's everyday lives. Sometimes a little bit of positivity actually goes a long way. So think of some of the classic Disney movies. What do many of them have in common? It's the "I Want" song. What's the "I Want" song? Well, think of Aladdin. When he sings "One Jump Ahead," he's talking about how it's a struggle just to survive on the streets. So by near the end of the song, when he starts walking into his makeshift home, that's on one of the rooftops of Agrabah. He sings, riff raff, street rat, I don't buy that. If only they'd look closer, would they see a poor boy? No siree. They'd find out there's so much more to me. Something like that. But you think about Ariel and how she sings part of your world. She's got gadgets and gizmos aplenty, but she still wants more. She wants to spend a day out in the sun, on the warm sand. She wants to experience what it means to jump, to dance. She's not necessarily talking about her problems. Instead, she speaks intensely about her desires. Think about Mulan. Her desire is to be able to be herself. Her deepest desire is to experience that moment when her reflection finally shows who she is inside, when they correlate, so to speak. So how does this translate to writing your introductions? Think about your audience's deepest desires rather than their problems. So it's the flip side. Is their biggest desire a clean house, a fuel-efficient car, or a partner that loves and supports them unconditionally? Do they long for a vacation out in the mountains or the sea? Or are they looking for the perfect device that can help them become fully immersed in their video games? Tap into those desires, and you have the recipe for an irresistible hook. Now, when you put all these 4 tips together, you have the recipe, basically, for a spellbinding hook that will keep your audience interested and entertained. If you want to go deeper and learn more about the art of copywriting, I have this short $8 ebook. It's my copywriting spellbook, and it'll teach you step by step how to perform, the ultimate Jedi mind trick, so that your content and your copy can get you more eyeballs and sales. So if you're interested in learning about my system and how I write content and copy, just click the link in the description below. Thanks.